you know, have children and do all of those things, they're not important. What you have to do is go out and get a career, and all that other stuff will just happen. And then, of course, you have the Bridget Jones generation, which is very boring, but it is my generation, this generation of women who kind of say, well, we have the careers and we have the jobs and we have all of that, so where's the husband? You know, and realising that having a husband and children has passed us by. I think that one of the reasons that I love writing about history and I love writing about my grandmother's generation is because I think in many ways that generation was lost to my generation so very quickly. I knew my grandmother, she lived with us, but the way that she lived as a young woman and the skills that she had, the way that she could knit a jumper, the way that she could darn a sock, all of those skills, all of those things that she was able to do, the fact that she baked bread every single day so she could make really beautiful bread, all of those things were, you know, they're just completely alien to my life, and they disappeared just in this one generation in the middle. And so for me, writing about those things is a way of keeping them alive and a way, I suppose, of paying homage to those women. And I think it's interesting and sad as well that so many of those skills have been lost, and I do think it's just because they were what women did, and therefore they weren't very important, and they were devalued, and they were somehow blamed for the fact that, you know, we weren't able to work and we weren't emancipated. They were very associated with the drudgery of the imprisonment that we were in as housewives. I'm just going to read another piece. There's a wonderful extract from the tape, which I'm going to go right home and try and get sorted out, where my grandmother is talking about the Irish tradition of the mehel. And the mehel was, I think the equivalent over here is the kind of the Amish barn building tradition. The mehel in Ireland was so many, we lived in such an immigrant culture that out in the rural areas, an awful lot of the men were working abroad, and every summer there had to be the men had to bring in the hay in order to feed the cattle during the winter. And there were never enough men to go around. So what they used to do is all of the neighbours used to gather up together and get the hay for each other. And she talks about the women's role in that, and the fact that women were never allowed to touch the black porter. She said it was considered the lowest of the low to take a glass of black porter in your hand. The women had wine if they had anything. And the women's job on those days was the cooking. You know, the men would, and it was some job. You know, I mean, they were catering for, like, you know, all of the men in the vicinity would come, and the woman of the house would have to oversee catering and cooking for them. And they were very popular gatherings for all of the women to get together, and they kind of get together and show themselves off a little bit, and, you know, kind of. So there's an extract here from the book towards the end of the book where Ellie goes back to Ireland, and she holds a mehel. She's decided that she wants to open a shop with her husband, and they hold a mehel. The men arrived at first light, more than 30 of them walking up from the road. Some of them were carrying tools over their shoulders, and with the red sky behind them, they looked like an army marching towards us. Following behind them were a scattering of women, many of them older, lifting their long skirts clear of the damp grass. It was clear that our invitations had been taken up by all the men of the townland, but by far fewer of the women. Maidy greeted each woman at the door, taking their cakes and tarts and placing them on the kitchen table. All of the women knew who I was, but I struggled to place many of them, which set me at a disadvantage at once. While I recognised some faces, I could not then recall their names, which created an awkwardness in me. The first hour passed in a flurry of business as the men had to be fed before their day's work began. Maidy acted the hostess, running around, shouting instructions at all of us, looking for more tea, another hunk of bacon, and faster slicing of the soda cake. When the men had left to do the work, the women were able to settle then with our tea and sweet things. There were around 10 of us in all. It was the discreet handful that Maidy had promised us, but I could see by her face she was disappointed that more of the women had not turned up. Accustomed to how crowded these gatherings could become, several of the older women had brought their own stools and chairs to sit on, but there were so few of us that one or two of them were still empty. I put a plate of cake down on one milking stool to take the bare look off it, but the old crow who bought the cake gave me such a look that I removed the plate straight away. Maidy was wonderful. While the women clearly felt awkward in my house, she kept the conversation flowing between church news and general parish gossip. After a while, however, she saw that Port had forgotten his jacket, and she excused herself to take it down to him. After she left the room, a terrible, awkward silence descended, and I was at a complete loss as to how to break it. We smiled weakly at one another, and I thought one of us might faint with tension. Then I noticed the oldest woman, Brid Donnelly, a religious matriarch whom all the younger women respected and feared in turn, shift uncomfortably in her seat. Relieved at having an excuse to break the silence, I said, "Do you need a cushion there, Brid?" "No, I'm fine, really. I leapt out of my seat anyway. You do. Wait there a minute." I all but ran into the bedroom and sighed deeply in relief for a few seconds before grabbing a small cushion from the bed. It was a hand-embroidered one that my friend in New York, Emily's mother, had given me to use for comfort on my journey home. I did not want to go back in and wondered how long it would be before Maidy returned to rescue me, but I forced myself back through the door. "There," I said, smiling and handing the cushion to Brid. "Thank you," she said. Then, before she put it behind her back, she held it up to her face and exclaimed, "What a beautiful piece of embroidery." "Thank you," I said, but Brid ignored me and handed it over to a woman sitting at the table. "Carmel," she said, "take a look and tell me what you think of this." Carmel took the cushion, and as soon as her hand touched it, she said, "Mother of God, it's so soft. What class of a fabric is that?" "It's velvet," I replied. "Well, my word," she said, "and I never knew velvet could be embroidered." She rummaged in the pocket of her apron and took out a tiny pair of glasses. She hooked them around her ears and began to examine the cushion like a diamond dealer. "Oh, that is magnificent," she said. "Truly now, the colours." "Did you ever see the like of that, Carmel?" "Never in my life." "Where would you get a thread that colour, I wonder?" "Nuala, take a look at this." Carmel handed on Mrs. Andruskovich's cushion to Nuala as if it was made of gold leaf, and every woman gathered about to look at the intricate embroidery work and feel the soft brush of the velvet. It was clear from the close way they were studying the workmanship that these women were keen craftswomen themselves, and I felt a surge of pride that my little black cushion was getting such attention and praise. "Who embroidered this?" Nuala asked. "Was it yourself?" She looked at me directly, her voice full of amazement. "No," I replied. "It was my friend's mother in America, a Polish lady." "Polish," several of them said together, nodding. "And is she living around here?" a younger woman whom I didn't recognise asked. "You silly fool," Brid reprimanded her. "Eileen was in America, isn't that it? Isn't that where you got it from?" "Have you anything else like it?" Carmel piped up. "I've some more of her work, I think." Emily's mother had given me several things she'd embroidered, but I never placed any particular value on them before, in truth, finding them a little bright and gaudy for my tastes. But seeing her work through the eyes of these discerning women, I could see the beauty in it. I went into the bedroom and dragged the trunk out from under the bed and into the kitchen. The women dispersed from around the embroidered cushion on Nuala's nap and gathered in a circle about me. I felt like Ali Baba as I lifted the trunk onto its side and began to open the drawers. "Here," I said, finding a set of embroidered cotton napkins in a garish purple and passing them around. The women cooed over them for ages until Brid said, "I declare, Ellie, well, thank you for showing us all this. It's the most delicate bit of work I've ever seen." She folded it and held it up to return it to me. "You can keep it," I said. Then, seeing her confused look back at me, I said, "As a gift, please have them." "Oh, I couldn't possibly." She bristled, and I became worried that I had offended the older woman. "Certainly you can." Maidy had come back and was standing at the door. "I declare you women have given away crochet work to cover half the fields of Kilmoy. You can surely afford to take something back." Brid puffed, but put the piece on her lap. "Besides, Ellie has no use for them here. Have you, Ellie?" I followed her lead. "No, indeed," I said, adding, "And Carmel, please, you take the cushion." Both women put their heads down and waved their hands around in violent objection, saying, "No, no, no, Ellie." But with Maidy's encouragement, I kept going. I opened another drawer and pulled out the glass cat Sheila had given me. It was wrapped in tissue paper. "Here, Nuala," I said, passing it across to the astonished redhead. "You take this." She unwrapped it and gasped. Oh, no, Ellie, she said, there's no way I could take this off you. I looked at Nuala holding the cheap glass